Hey guys, how's it going? Today I'm going to show you how to create a Pomodoro clock in React. We are going to build this from scratch using VS Code. Let's jump right in. So I have gitbash opened here, and I have a directory called React Tutorial. So you'll want to gitbash into that directory. If you guys don't have gitbash installed, you want to download gitbash for Windows or Mac, whatever you guys have. You can just go for windows.org and download it from here. That's all you'll need to download, and VS Code, of course. So I'm in the React tutorial directory, and what we're going to do here is we're going to say npx create react app, and let's do Pomodoro app. This is going to take a couple minutes, so I'll probably fast forward through this. Alright guys, React has been downloaded. So we are going to cd into our Pomodoro app directory. Okay, and then I'm just going to do npm start, and we won't need gitbash anymore. Okay, so let's look in here and let's see what we have. We have our source, public. We don't need a lot of these beginning thing, what's loaded with the create react app. So I'm just going to delete this. So index.css is not needed. We will need index.js. We don't need any of these logos, but we're just going to ignore that for now. We don't really care about that. That won't mess with what we're going to build. And in our app.js, we are going to, let me move this a little bit like this. Okay, let's get rid of all of this inside the div. And let's also open up our app.css and remove all of these styles. Okay, so, and also I'm going to get rid of this import. And one more change that I'm going to do. In the source, I'm going to create a directory called components. And all of our components will go in the components directory. And index.js is going to be broken because we need to say app is from components app and CSS will be broken in our app.js. Okay, cool. So now we can create our components and do whatever we want. So in our div here, I'm going to get rid of this. I'm just going to have a main here. And I'm going to have an H2. In the H2, we're going to just say Pomodoro clock. Okay, cool. So next thing we're going to do is we need to think about how we're going to break this up into different components and what state we'll keep and etc. So I definitely want to keep state in the app level component. So I'm going to change this into a class level instead of function. And this is going to be class app extends react.component, and before we return we need to render. We need to add this function and put the render inside the put the return inside the render. Also we will have a constructor, and then we'll call the super function, and then we are going to have this dot state. For now we'll leave it like that. Okay, so first thing, let's decide how we're going to break this up. So we have a break length, session length, and then we're showing the session length, and then the action buttons is what I'm calling them, play, stop, and refresh. So I see three components. So we have the break length with the up and down, and then we have session length with the up and down buttons. And then we have the box showing the break length and the session length as well with these play, stop, and refresh buttons. So this will be a component, and these two will be in separate components as well. And for this project, since it's small, we're going to keep everything in one CSS file just for simplicity. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is let's create our components, shall we? Let's go in the components directory. Let's say break interval, and I'm going to keep this both uppercase .js, and then I'm going to say session length .js, and then I'm just going to say timer.js. All right, so now we have our class. We're going to keep track of state here. So in the state, we're going to have several main things that we need to keep track of. We need to keep track of the break length. And for now, we'll give these defaults a 5. And then for the session length, we'll do it for 25. Okay, and I'm going to just stay in here now. Okay, so now let's create our break interval component. Here, this will be just a functional component, so I'm just going to say import React from React function break interval. And then we are probably going to pass props, so let's pass props in there, and then let's have a return. Okay, we're going to have a section. And then inside the section, we're going to have 2 buttons. One is going to be down, and the other will be up. And then in between, we are going to have the actual length, the timer length for the break. So this is going to be passed down from props. So we're going to pass down from app.js component into props. So we're going to say props.break interval. And we need to put these inside curly braces. And then we're going to just export this. Okay, so let's import this now. We're going to import right here, import break interval from break interval. And then right below here, we're going to just call it. And then let's go ahead and pass the state down. So we're going to say break interval curly braces dis.state.break length. Okay, so we have 5 down here. And we'll do all the styling in just a little bit. I just want to get these components set up. And then we're going to have session length. In session length, we're going to do pretty much the same exact thing. It's just going to deal with the session length. We're going to say import React from React. Then it's going to be functional as well. And then we're going to call this session length. We're going to pass props. And then we're going to have a return. And then let's export this as well. In here, this will be a section as well. Inside the section, we're going to do the same exact thing. Down. And then up. And then we'll have the session length showing here. Props.session length. Okay, in our app.js, we will import this. And let's call it right below break length. And let's pass in the session length from state. And I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so you guys can see the code. Okay, so now we are going to create our timer.js. So as you can see, we have the break length, the session length, and then we'll have the timer as well. So just real quick, let's create this. So this is going to be a class component because we need to keep state of whether the timer is playing or if it's stopped, or we don't really need a state for refresh, but we need a state to change this timing. So the minute hand and the second, we will keep separate states for each individual one. And you'll see why we do that eventually when we get to that point. So in here, we are going to say import React from React class. Let's call this timer extends React.component. We'll have our render and then return. And then we will have our constructor called a super function, and then also state. So here we will have state of a couple things. If is play, and we're going to set this, okay, we're not going to keep track of this here actually. So we'll get to that point later. I don't need to bring that up now. And let's just in here add the HTML. So inside this section, we're going to have another section. So this section is this intersection is going to be this session timer. So we're going to say, let's see here, h4, and since we're going to pass down some props. So this will be based on some conditional rendering. If the current timer is the session length, then we will display session. Otherwise, we'll display the break one. So let's say we will do this.props.isSession. And if that is equal to true, then we are going to display session. Otherwise, we will display break. And it's going to be undefined right now. And this will not need to be passed down from the parent component. We will just keep state of this in our current component. So we can say isSession is set to true. Okay. So let's export this. Default timer. And then we also need our minute and second to show. So we will say this is going to be passed as the minute. So in our app component, we are going to keep track of the timer minute here, which is going to be set as the session length by default. And then in here, we are going to keep track of the timer second, because the app component will not care about that at all. We won't care. We won't need to worry about that there. We'll maintain it here. Timer second is equal to 0. So in this span, we are going to say this.props.timer minute. Then we'll have another span for the colon. Then we'll have one more, which is going to be this.state.timer second. Okay, and it's probably going to look really messy right now, so just bear with me for a second. And let's import this timer class, timer component from timer. And then timer, we are going to pass down the timer minute from state. Okay, so it's not gonna timer minute right now. Let me see what I put it as. This.props.timer minute. So we should have gotten. Okay, I see where I made the mistake. We didn't do that camel case. Okay, so now let's go to timer.js. So this timer.second, we're going to need some conditional rendering. So if it's 0, we need to display it as 0, 0. So we will say if timer second is equal to 0, we will display it as 0, 0. And then we need to do some more conditional rendering. Second if statement, basically. So if it's less than 10, we need to add a 0 before the number. So if it's 1, we need to say 0, 1. So we will say this.state.timer second is less than 10. We will say 0 plus this.state.timer minute, timer minute. Oh, and this is not going to be timer minute. This is going to be timer second. Okay, and then we'll have another colon, which will just be this.state.timer second. Okay, it's a little messy, but let me see if I can clean that up. Okay, that looks better. Okay guys, so now we're passing everything down. Let's add some CSS and make this pretty, shall we? So first thing we want to do is center this like this. So to do that, we're going to use Flexbox. We will say display flex, and we'll give this a height of 90 vertical height. And then we are going to say flex direction, and we're going to say column. Okay, and then we're going to justify the content to be center. And let me show you guys what's happening so far. And then we also need to align the items as center. Okay, cool. So we have that. And then we'll need to go back and let's increase the size of the Pomodoro clock. So since H2 is unique here, we're just going to say H2 font size. Let's do 4 REM. And let's reduce the font weight to 400. Okay, and then the next thing we want to do is work on the break interval. So let's give this section a class of interval container. This is going to share the same class as session length component. And this needs to be class name, not class. Okay, so in here we'll say interval container. We're going to use Flexbox in here as well. Okay, and then we are going to do one more thing. We are going to put this break interval and session length inside of its own section. Okay, so let me see this. I really could have called this break length or session interval, vice versa. It doesn't matter. Whatever you want to call it, it works. Class name is interval. Okay, so I have an interval container already. Let's do interval length container. I'm sorry guys about the lack of creativity there. Interval length container. And this is also going to be display flex because we are going to show this on the same block, basically, the same row. And let's add some margin. So not in the container, but in this container itself, we will add some margin. Let's do 20 pixels. Okay, and we don't need to give a top and bottom margin, so we'll do just left and right. And then we need to add some space between the P tag and the buttons itself. So let's give some styling to the buttons. So all the buttons will be the same styling. So I'm going to say button here, and I'm going to say the padding will be 5 pixels with 12 pixels left and right. And let's give it some margin of left and right of 10 pixels. Okay, and then let's reduce the height to 25 pixels. Okay, and then let's give this some background color. Let's do 263,646. And let's get rid of the border and the outline. And let's also add the cursor as pointer. And let's change the color in here to EEE. Okay. So the reason why this is going up like this, I'll show you. If you look at the section container, we need to align the items center. Since we are using flex for this, the interval container, we can simply just say, I believe it's going to be align items center. Cool. And then next thing we can do is increase the font size of these lengths. So let's see, we just have p tags. They probably will not be unique here. So let's give this a class name of interval length. Let's do the same thing here. And let's come down here and say interval length is going to be font size. Let's do 2 rem. Okay, and let's add some margin in between there. We need some more spacing. 0 and then 10 pixels. Cool. And then we forgot to add something in the components here. We need to add an H4, and let's do break length. Let's just do break. Let me see what I have here. Break length. Okay, so that is showing up in the same row, so we cannot do that. We can do a little simple trick here and put this section inside here and then add the H4 here. Okay, and then let's do the same thing for the session length component. Okay. So let's center this and let's change this to session. Let me see where this needs to be centered though. Okay, so in this section itself, interval. Okay. In interval, okay, so this needs to be so we need to give this a class name as well. Actually, we don't need to do that here. We can just give the class name here. Let me see if H4 is being used anywhere else just to make this easier. I'm trying to get through the CSS quickly. Okay, we don't have any H4s. So we will just text align centerless. Cool. And let's increase the font size. Let's do 3 rem. That might be huge. Yeah, that is way too big. Let's do 2.5. And that is also huge. Okay, and then let's reduce the font weight to 400. Okay, and we will need to add more margin here in between these two containers. So let's go ahead and do that in the interval container. Let's add the margin to like, let's say 40. Okay, that's good. And then the next thing we need to do is work on this. So we will add the styling for that. Let's go to the timer. I'm going to close out of this index.js. We don't need that. In the timer, we will have, okay, so this session title will need to go outside of this section. But wait a second, 1 second. No, it won't. Sorry about that. We are going to give this a class name of timer container. And then in timer container, we're going to add a border of 2 pixels solid, and we'll just do the same color. Okay, and let's push this down by 40 pixels. Let's add some border radius of 25 pixels. Okay, and then let's also increase the width. Let's try 300, that might be really big. I think 250 should be good. Okay, and then the next thing we want to do is fix everything inside. Let's see if we can fix the alignment here. Yeah, cool. So the session is, we want it near the top. And then one more thing I want to do here is add some box shadow. So we're going to do 0, 2 pixels, 4 pixels, RGBA, 0, 0, 0, and 0.50. Okay, cool. Should give it some lift. So the next thing we want to do is not have this centered like this. So I'm going to push it to the top. So let's see where that's happening. In the session H4, I'm going to get rid of that top margin. That's what's causing it to push down. Cool. And then this timer right here, let's see, this is a span. So this span, we're going to give the same class name to all three of these. And we're just going to say timer. Okay, inside of the timer class, what we'll do is increase the font size. Let's do 1.5 rem. And we can do a little bit more. You can get away with 2. Okay, and then let's push this up a little. I think there's a is there a margin? Let me see. I think there's a margin bottom being caught. Yeah, okay, by the H4. So let's do, we still want a margin bottom, but not that crazy. Oh, what happened here? In the timer class, I forgot to take this. Okay, cool. And then in the container of the timer, let's just add some padding, push everything in. Okay, cool, guys. So we need to just add the play, stop, and refresh button now in here, and that should be it for the HTML and CSS part. We're gonna have to do it outside of this container, and then we can create a different container, and let's call this timer actions. I feel like we could have made this its own component as well, but I think we would have to take care of too much state then. So for reducing it, we could just keep it in this component. So we can have button, play. I'm just going to copy this, stop, and refresh. Cool. And it already has the setup because I styled it with button. Okay, so now this timer actions, I just need to push it down a little. We can do margin top 20 pixels, and then I believe we can, let me see the width of this. We can do probably text align center. Cool. Okay, let's see how this looks. Pretty similar. Not as good. Okay, so one more thing. These are really small things. We can just add a common pixel width, make the buttons look the same, and then add a border radius to 2 pixels. Okay, so now let's, okay, we need to not do 55. That'll cut off some of it. Yeah, let's do something like that for now. That's fine. And maybe reduce the padding. Okay, cool. So next thing we're going to do is get into the actual React side. So we don't need the CSS anymore. And let's start from app.js. So let's handle one component at a time. So we need to be able to increase and decrease these counters. So let's start with the basic stuff here. So we have break length. What we're passing it down as a prop right now to break interval component. what we want to do is pass it down as a prop, and break interval component, we want to check here if it's increase or decrease. If it is, we're going to pass it back up to app.js, and this is called lifting state up. So we're going to lift the state up and change the state here, so we can keep track of the state in the parent component. So the way we do that is let's take care of the event handlers here. So we'll do onClick, and then we'll do, this is a function, right? So we're going to just do decrease counter. I'm going to copy this and put this in here as well. And we'll call this increase. Two basic functions here. We'll have function decrease counter, and then we'll say, so we need to have a check here. First thing we need to do is if props dot break interval, let me see, that's what we're passing it down as. Break interval is camel case, is equal to 1. We're just gonna return this. We don't want the user to change it. If they go down to 1 and they try to go any more lower than that, that doesn't make any sense. Otherwise, we will call a function here, and let's define increase counter. And then let's have a limit here as well for session interval. In the session interval, the limit will be, sorry, we're still in break interval, sorry. We're gonna have a upper limit of break interval. We can just do 60, I guess. This is just arbitrary number. You can pick whatever you want. We'll just return. Okay, so here below this if it's not in this if condition, we will increase or decrease the counter. So the way we do that is we'll create two functions here. We're gonna say on increase break length. Okay, we're gonna do this dot set state, and we're gonna need the previous state. So to get the previous state, you can simply use an arrow function, pass in the parameter of previous state, and then we can return break length, previous state dot break length is +1. This will increase the break length by 1. So let's come in here, and now we need to pass this down as a prop. So in the timer, we can say increase break. We'll keep it simple, and then we're going to say on increase, and we need to use this dot on increase. And I'm going to just put this all in its own line. So if you do Shift Alt F, it'll make it pretty formatted for you. And then we need to also bind this here since we're using this inside the function. So this dot increase break length is equal to this on increase break length dot bind this. Okay, so now just to show you guys that the up functionality will work, increase the counter, we can say that not this props dot on, not on, let me see what I called it in the prop, increase break, and that's it. That's all we got to do. So if we come up here, okay, let me see what I called this, increase break. Sorry about that, guys. So I just realized I passed it down to the wrong component here. Okay, this needs to go to the break interval component. Sorry about that, guys. So now if we click up, it's going to increase the break length. And if you guys don't have React tools, Chrome extension installed, it's a great resource to have, especially for debugging. So you'll want to download that. And if you go to the components here and you go to break interval, you can see that the props that's being sent down is 10. So if you look at the state here, it's 10 as well. So if I click up, it keeps getting increased. It's a great way to debug to see if something's not getting updated or some error or something like that. It's a great tool. So now we want to do the same thing for decreasing. On decrease break length, I'm going to copy this. It's just going to be a -1 instead of a +1. And then we are going to pass this down. Decrease break is equal to on decrease break length. And then in our break interval, I'm just going to copy this and call this decrease break. Okay, so we should, one thing I forgot to do is bind. So I'm just going to copy this. If I do Shift Alt down, should copy this. This on decrease. On decrease. Okay, let's try that again. So if I go up or down, and it should not let me go down past below 1, which is not. Okay, cool. We're going to do the same exact thing for session length. I feel like there's probably an easier way to make one generic function to increase or decrease for either one. But for now, just for simplicity, we'll just do this. So next thing we are going to do is in the session length, we're going to say on increase session length. And I'm going to copy this. And this is going to be session length. And this will be session as well. And this will be plus. And then we're going to bind this. Call this on increase session length. And then let's do it one more time. This will be called on decrease session length. Okay, and then we'll create the function here on decrease session length. And then let's just copy this and do -1. Okay, and let's pass this down here. So we'll do increase session is equal to this dot not state on increase session length. I could have probably named these better. Decrease, not break, but session is equal to this dot on decrease session length. Okay, in session length, we are going to add an on click. And I realized one thing. We could simply just call the props dot decrease session directly in here instead of calling a function. But we should not do that because we need to add some validation like we do in the break interval for the if statement. So yeah, it's better to have our own function. We will say increase session, sorry, not increase, but decrease. If there were no validations, we could simply just call it in the button on click event, but that's okay. Increase here, and then we'll create our two functions. Function increase session. And then in here, we're going to just have some validation. So if this, sorry, not if this, if props dot, what is it called? Session length, right? Is greater than, oh, if it's equal to 60, we'll return. Let's keep the maximum at 60. Otherwise, we're going to do props dot increase session. Okay, and then we'll copy this function and then paste it here. And let's call this decrease. And then props.session length is going to be just 1. We'll keep it the same. And we're gonna decrease. Okay. Okay, cool. So now we're keeping state in the app component for the session length and the break length. So now let's keep track of every time a user would click on the up or down on the session length, it'll also show that in the session timer box. So the way we need to do that is we just simply need to pass down here the session length. And actually one thing we need to do here, So one thing we need to do here, guys, is while we increase or decrease the session length, we also need to keep the same track of the timer minute. So let's do that. In here, let's do timer minute, and we're just gonna copy this. Okay, and then we're gonna copy the same thing. I'm gonna copy this. And then we will need a comma. And let's change this to minus. So now it will just match. Yep, cool. And it shouldn't go below 1. All right, so we have this session length. Let's see what we are passing down to the timer. So the timer, the only thing we're passing down is the timer minute. So we need to also pass down the break length, because we are going to, once the session timer ends, we need to start the break timer. Okay, so what we can do, what we'll need to do at that point is when the session timer ends, we'll need to have I think we already have this in state, if session is false. If session is false, we need to update the timer minute to be the break timer. Okay, so that might be a lot to intake, but we'll take it one step at a time. So for now, let's pass in the break timer. We'll do this.state.break length. And just to be consistent here, guys, I don't want to add different meanings. We'll just keep it at break length. Okay, so is there anything else that I need to pass? For now, I think that'll be it. We'll need to pass some functions down. So I'm going to go ahead and create that as well to update the timer. So we're going to need to update the timer here in the app component. So on update timer minute, and here we're going to say this.setState, and then we'll need to keep track of the previous state. Okay, so we're going to return, and then the timer minute is going to be previous state.timer minute, and this is going to update, so it's going to go down to 1. And then another thing we want to do is on toggle interval. So what this means is we're going to switch this from session length to break length. I wish I had a better word for that, but I don't at the moment. So this.setState, and then we're going to say previous state. And actually here we'll just pass down, since we're keeping state for isSession in this class component, what we'll do is we'll pass it down and pass it into this function. So we'll say isSession. So we'll do isState, setState, and then we're going to say toggle interval, right? So what we're going to do here, what this means is we're going to set the timer minute to either the session or the break timer. So we can say if isSession, so that means if it's a session currently, sorry, if the timer just finished being a break init timer and it's going to be a session timer now, that means it's true. So now we want the timer minute to be equal to session length. Else, the isSession is false, meaning the break timer is currently going now. So what we want to do here is this dot set state timer minute break length. And this is, we can't just say break length. This dot state and this dot state. Sorry about that, guys. I hope I'm not going too fast and this is understandable. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments down below. I would love to answer any of them. Okay, so now we're going to pass this down to timer. So on timer, we're going to have update timer minute. This dot, what is it called? On update timer. And then we'll also need to bind these since we're using keeping track of state in there. And then toggle interval is this dot on toggle interval. And let's just add these. So we can say this dot on toggle interval is equal to this dot on toggle interval dot bind this, and then this on time update timer minute is equal to this on update timer minute dot bind this. Okay, I know there's a lot of things going on here, but if we take it one step at a time, it's not so bad. These are just updating the lengths in the timer minute. So if you're wondering why we need a separate timer minute, is because if we hit the refresh button, we want this timer to be reset to the session length, whatever the user has created it to be. So that's why I'm passing down our timer minute. And the timer second, we're going to keep track of here in itself. Okay, guys, so that was probably a lot. We're almost there. In the timer.js now, we need to start with the play timer. So let's start with these button actions. So on click, we will just simply say this dot play, copy this dot stop, and then we'll just say this dot reset. We'll need to, let's bind at least play for now. I believe we'll need to bind all of them. Dot bind. Okay, let's work on the play button. Okay, yeah, I need to define play here. Okay, so in the play button, what's going to happen is we're going to start this timer. So first thing we're going to do is decrease the timer to 24, and then we're going to decrease this, we're going to change this to 59, and then start an interval timer of every 1 second to decrease the timer second here. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to have a interval and set interval. We're going to have a function in here, and then we're going to update it every second. So in this function, we're going to just say decrease timer. And this is going to be this dot decrease. And we will need to call decrease timer here. Okay, so if you're wondering what's the interval ID is for, it's because when we hit stop, we need to clear the interval, and we will need the interval ID in state for that. So we'll start it off as 0. Once we get the interval ID, we will set it here. Okay, cool. So that should be all the things we need to do in play. So once this interval is started, decrease timer will get called. So what are we going to do in decrease timer? First thing we're going to do is handle the seconds here. So we'll have a switch statement for this dot state dot timer second, and then we need to bind decrease timer because we're going to be dealing with this And then this is going to be equal to this dot decrease timer dot bind. Okay. So in the switch statement, we're going to have one case really, and then a default case. Okay, so if the time second is 0, we want to decrease it and set it to 59. Not decrease it, we want to just set it to 59. So we're going to do this dot set state timer second is 59. If it's not 0, then all we're going to do is update it. So we're going to do this dot set state, and we'll need previous state here. We'll get prev state, and then we'll just return timer second, and then we're going to just do prev state dot timer second minus 1. So this function will get called every second, and these are the two cases for now. So let's try it, shall we? And also, the first thing we need to do, also make sure, is we need to decrease this. So where do we check that? If timer minute is equal to 0, so we're getting that in a prop, as a prop here, timer minute, right? So we can check it in the decrease timer itself. So if the case is 0, we need to decrease the timer minute every time as well. So what we can do here is this dot on update. Let me see what I called the function here. On, not on, just this dot update timer minute. And this is not going to take any parameters. So all this is going to do is reduce the timer minute by 1. So this is this dot props, sorry. This dot props. Okay. Okay, guys, so let's go through this flow. So we start the timer, and then it'll start the interval, and then we'll call this function, and then if the seconds is 0, we will update the timer minute. What that means, it's going to decrease it by 1. Okay, and then I guess I should have called it decrease timer minute. That probably would have been better. And then we're going to set the timer second to 59. If it's not 0, then we're just going to decrease the timer second. So let's just try that. Cool. So that's working. But now we don't have a stop button. So the stop will be really simple. So we have stop here. Could have called it stop timer or something like that. That's probably going to be better. Let's give some proper names here. Play timer, stop timer, and play timer. Okay. And then in stop timer, for now what we're going to do is clear the interval, which is going to just take the interval ID from state. So I can press play, and then it should stop. Oh, undefined. Let's see. Did I bind it? No, I did not. That's probably why. Let's change this to stop. All right, let's try that again. Awesome. And then what is reset timer going to do? So reset timer will clear the interval, and it will also reset this to 25. Okay, so let's take care of that. Let's see, what did I call? I'm going to call this reset timer as well. And then in reset timer will also need to be binded. Okay, so let's see what happened. Yep, I didn't call it yet. Declared reset timer. So in here, I'm going to call stop timer. This dot stop timer. Okay, let that be called. Sorry about that. We need to add the parentheses there because it's a function. Okay, so, and then we also need to update the timer minute, and we need to reset the seconds to 0. So let's do this dot set state, and then in here it's just going to be timer second is going to be 0. But we also need to tell app to update the timer minute back to the session length. So let's see, what do we have? We need to have a reset function here. Let's do on reset timer. And then all we're going to do here is this dot set state. We can just say timer minute. Are we having that already or no? I guess, yeah, we can use that for this. We're not doing that currently. So this is going to be this dot state dot session length. And let's pass this down. Reset timer is equal to this dot on reset timer. And I will need to bind this. This dot on reset timer. Okay, so now we have that function available. We will simply just call it and props here. This dot reset timer. Okay guys, let's try that. Awesome. And let's try doing that. Okay, so there's a couple things we still need to do. If we need to now do one more thing. I'm going to let this keep running and I'll explain what we need to do. So once the timer second is 0, we also need to have a check here. If this dot props dot timer minute is also equal to 0, well, we need to change that to the next timer, which is the break or session, depending on what the current timer is. And also, yep, and then, so now in here, we will say if, this is where is session will come into hand. If session, so if it's currently a session, we are going to do this dot set state. We don't care about the previous state, so we're going to say is session is equal to false, meaning it's the break timer. So in the break timer, we will update the minute hand, the timer minute, which we created a function called toggle interval, which we called here toggle interval as well. So we can just say this dot props dot toggle interval. Okay, and if it's not a session, that means it is on the break timer. So we need to do the exact opposite in state and still call the same thing. Also, one thing I forgot, we need to pass is session as a parameter in this for this function. So here we will just pass this dot state is session. Okay guys, so I'm going to reduce this all the way down to 1. And I'm going to reduce this down to 2. So let's see here if it works. And one more thing we need to do is, while that's going on, we should disable these buttons. We should not let the user click on these up and down buttons at all. So the way we can do that is have an is play state. So here we can say is play. I know there's a lot of things to keep track of. So isPlay is equal to false. If isPlay is equal to false, right? So if it's equal to true, we need to disable the button. So on the bottom here on the break interval and session length, let's pass it down as a prop. isPlay. And we're getting ready for the moment of the truth here. Awesome. Cool, guys. So it's switched to break length. And now it should switch back to session length after 2 minutes. But we're not going to wait that long. Maybe if this, let's just do all of this without saving. So isPlay. So we need to update isPlay from the timer. On play timer. Okay. We need a way to like keep better warning here for the meeting, so we can say, yeah, we'll just say on play timer, because default isPlay will be false, right? So we will keep a track here. And let's do one thing. Let's do play stop timer. That'll be better. This dot set state is play, and this is going to be equal to isPlay. And we're going to pass this down as a prop to our timer. And this is going to be on play stop timer, and we need to bind this. This on play stop timer, copy this. Okay, so let's come into here. Yeah, we already have a lot going on, but I would definitely have broken this up probably even more. But for this tutorial, it's going to be fine. So on play stop timer, and the moment of truth again, and awesome. Hey guys, one thing I forgot is we should have an if-else statement here. So if the timer minute is not equal to 0 and the case is 0, we should only update the timer minute and set the state then. But if it is, this will take care of it for us, this toggle interval. So let's say we're at 1 minute and it switches to 2 minutes after to the break length. So at 0, 0, it should switch to 2 and then 159. I saw that it was going from 0 to 159 straight, which should not be happening. So just wanted to let you guys know about that. Okay, so I'm going to switch this down back to 1 and just test that again. And we were on play stop timer. So on play stop timer, this is going to just call this dot props dot play stop on play stop timer. And let's make sure that's what I have. Okay. And this will be called when the play button is pressed. So we can just simply include that here. And this will also be called when the play button is not, when it's stopped. So we need to also probably send a true or false. Yep, which we already are. And this will be a true, and this will be a false. And as well as here, refresh will be a false as well. Okay. All right, guys, so there is one case that I forgot in the reset timer. Whenever we're resetting the state here for timer second, we also need to reset the isSession state back to true. No matter what it is, whether it's true or false, we're just going to reset it back to true so that it will always display session at the top. It'll reset the timer back to the session length, but we need to also set the is session to true so that whenever we're displaying the title, it'll be session. So let's just try it, and it'll be, even when it's on break, it will reset to session now. And then let's check, and let's do one more thing before I play this. In the CSS, we need to have a button disabled style. So if the button is disabled, and not disabled, we will say cursor not allowed. Okay, no more CSS, I promise now. And in our buttons for the break interval and session length, we are going to have some conditional rendering here. So we will say disabled this dot props dot, let me see, we need to be passing down is play, which we already are. Is play is equal to true. So if it's equal to true, then we are going to disable it, which just means adding disabled to this. Otherwise, just leave it empty. And let's copy the same logic and put it for all of the rest of the buttons. One second here. Props is of undefined. What? Oh, this is not a class. I'm sure you guys already knew that. Okay, so let's copy that here. Oh, I need to copy it and then paste it. Okay, and then let's put this like this. This looks prettier. And okay, so logic will be the same. Cool. I'm gonna pretty this as well. Decrease the counter is not defined. Line 24 session. I might have messed something up. Let me see. Decrease. Okay, I probably copied the wrong thing. Decrease counter. Okay, so now if I'm gonna put it down to 1, and if I play this, it should disable these buttons, which is exactly what we want to do. Well, I hope you guys learned something from this. If you guys have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below. I would love to answer any questions you guys have, any explanations you guys need. I'm going to be doing more React tutorials now, and I would love any ideas that you guys would want to give, and I will try to implement them. I just want to make sure the session timer and break timer work as intended. And perfect. Okay, guys. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and you learned something. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.